Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session today. It's great to see a full house. The session today is going to be about making reporting on Indigenous peoples' issues impactful and meaningful. And we have speakers here both in person and online, and I will introduce them. My name is Susan Beccio. I am here from the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and I lead global outreach. And online I have Tunda Lepore, María Monica Monsalve, Maria Paula Lizarazo, and in the room I have Anna Bressanin and Margherita Loddoni. I'm going to go to each one and they can introduce themselves a little bit better, tell us a little bit about who they are, what they do, and how they're connected to our talk today. I will go to Tunda first. Floor over to you, Tunda.
Thank you so much. As been said, my name is Tunda Lepore. I am an Indigenous woman from the Maasai community. I hope everyone can hear me. You all can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. An Indigenous woman from the Maasai community in Kenya, and I'm also actively involved in Slow Food Indigenous Terra Madre network. I served as an advisory board for Slow Food International Indigenous Terra Madre, and now I am serving as a counselor still with Slow Food and also with IFAD in the steering committee on Indigenous issues. I work with a women group called Kopito Women Group, which is an Indigenous-led women group for the Maasai women in Narok, where we enhance resilience and also the culture. We do intergenerational knowledge transfer. And also I am a professional life skills coach. That's what I also do for my day-to-day living. I teach students both in primary and also secondary and colleges on life skills trainings. And I work with different communities in the Indigenous network, both in Kenya and also in Africa. So I'm connected with different communities and my passion actually, before I started this, my passion was doing social work, and also it was because of my upbringing. I saw the challenges that I faced as an Indigenous woman from the Maasai community, where education was not valued for a female child. And it really motivated me to want to support girl child in the Indigenous in my community. And as I continued to learn, I grew curious to know, is it just in my community? So I learned that a lot of women are facing discrimination, and being Indigenous makes it even worse, because our society is largely patriarchal in nature. Therefore, the women play a lesser, or they are viewed like they play a lesser role in the society. Yes, we have a lot of things that we play. Like, for instance, in my community, the women are in charge of building the house. When the men would move with the cows, then the women are left with the children, make sure that the children are well catered for, and also the sheep and the goats will not be moving. Then it is the work of the woman to make sure that they are also being taken care of. So all this made me want to become a social worker. So I am this child. When I grew up, I already knew what I really wanted to do when I grow up. So it was so easy for me to identify what I wanted to do. And I'm so glad that this has continued to be a path that I continue to seek. And also being Indigenous, it has, and my mom has been a very strong, pillar in my life, because at some point they wanted to marry me off, because the Maasai marry off their daughters at 15. My mother was married off at 15 years old. So at some point when I was 14, my uncles wanted to marry me off because my father was unwell, and they thought that my mom is not going to be able to cater for me. So they asked that they marry me off as a token of thanksgiving to a guy who was treating my dad with herbal medicine. And my mom really stood, and she was like, no, the fact that the father is unwell, this girl, it doesn't mean that this girl will stop going to school. So she has been my role model. She has really fought a lot of battles of female genital mutilation, make sure that I didn't go through the cut, and this one has made me who I am today. And I believe that I'm alive to fight for other women that don't have voices, to make sure that they get the voice, the young girls that are disadvantaged, to get education, to make sure that they get an education. Well, that's in a nutshell, or a lot of words. I'm a social worker, so I talk a lot. So thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Tunda. And I'm sure the audience is going to have 100 questions after all of that information, really great information. Thank you. And María Monica, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning from here. I'm in Colombia. I'm a Colombian journalist that works for América Futura. That is a journalistic project from El Pais, from Spain, but that covers sustainable development in America Latina, or Latin America, sorry. And well, basically, I have focused most of my work in working or reporting on environment and climate change. And that is how I like, through that via, I have become really close to reporting on indigenous peoples, because the role they play in environmental protection, in environmental law, it's pretty important. So that's, I guess that is why I'm here. And I hope, I'm not native in English, so I really hope you can understand my English.
Thank you, María Monica. I think we understood it pretty well. That was excellent. Maria Paula, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm a Colombian environmental journalist. I work for El Espectador. It's a Colombian newspaper, and for the Brazilian media InfoAmazonia. My approach to indigenous people have been from my work on the Amazon region. In El Espectador and InfoAmazonia, we try to address the complexities of the region from a cross-border journalist perspective. And we want to understand not only the problems faced by indigenous people in the region, but also their initiative to conserve the forest and their cultures. So thank you, and I hope that you understand my English too.
Thank you so much from all three of you. And we're really glad that you were able to make it, even if it's online. It's really refreshing to hear you speak. So I'm going to go now to Anna, who's here in the room.
Yeah. Hello, hi. My name is Anna Bressanin. I'm the US editor of BBC Reel, which is the BBC platform for digital documentaries. I've been a journalist with the BBC for over 12 years, and over the years I covered indigenous issues several times. I was at the Standing Rock protest, which was an incredible moment in which 200 tribes, for the first time in 150 years, came together to protest against this pipeline, and as you were saying, playing an important role in protecting our planet. I've covered the issue of forced adoptions, which is a tragedy that Native American peoples had to go through in North America not so long ago, because I interviewed someone in her 60s, and she was given in adoption forcibly to a white family in this effort of integrating into society Native people. Throughout the years, my relationship to this kind of journalism has changed, and now I see my role mostly as elevating voices of emerging filmmakers from the community, and to make space for people of indigenous regions to tell their stories. So for instance, I created a film festival, and I was so proud to see that Sky Hopinka, a wonderful Native American filmmaker, was the winner of the festival. So in a way, I feel that today, one of the big goals for journalists like me is to try and create space and elevate indigenous voices and create that kind of dialogue. And even when we are on a breaking news situation, for instance, I had to commission a story during the COVID pandemic about how the tribes in the Amazon were impacted. And we sent someone there to cover the issue, but it was really, really important that it was somebody that actually was living in Rio, but she was from that region, and she has been there many, many times, and she knew people. So it was more of a collaboration. It was not somebody parachuted from London or New York. So I'm so glad that I've been invited here. Of course, I'm not indigenous myself, so I'm happy to contribute from my point of view and the little I know about this fascinating topic that I think is crucial for the future of our life on the planet, right? Because we are here all together.
Thank you so much, Anna. Very good. I'm going to pass over to Margherita now. She's an indigenous specialist from our organization, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and she will also give us a little bit of an idea of what we do and some of our experience working with indigenous people.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan, and such a pleasure to be here with all of you and also with Tunda and the other colleagues connected. Yes, I'm a consultant working for IFAD in an office which is dedicated to indigenous people's rights, indigenous people issues and rights. And I've been working at IFAD since 2014, so it's quite like around 7-8 years. And I'm mainly working on two projects. The first one is the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD. IFAD is a UN agency. And we have like this forum, which is a platform where indigenous people's representatives can dialogue with IFAD and tell their stories, tell their challenges, and we can work together to identify what we can do together and how to do it together. So it's really one of these spaces that Anna was mentioning now, that what is important today is, in my opinion, to open up spaces where indigenous peoples, they can speak their own voice, they can tell their own stories, no? We can just build, bridge, but then it's important that they have the words and they have the space. And the second, we are working on this Indigenous People Assistance Facility, which is a program where we are like actually financing small projects designed and implemented by indigenous communities from all over the world. And this is really interesting because a few days ago we were like looking with Carla, who is my colleagues here, at all the projects that we receive from these small communities, and it's such like there is like a lot of like stories, the way they tell their own stories and they're concerned. It's something that it's now indicating where is the direction that we need to follow, no? About climate crisis, climate challenges, climate changes, and also like a focus on the indigenous women and the leadership that indigenous women activists have now on how we can address all these challenges. So those are mainly the two projects I'm working on, and yes, during this session, maybe I will add something more. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Margherita. I wanted to go back to Tunda for a minute, and actually didn't know she was a social worker, which is as well. And she's here, she's an Indigenous Peoples leader, so she's not just, the microphone keeps cutting off. She's not just talking from her own experience, but she's also talking from, as a leader, gathering input from other Indigenous Peoples groups and leaders. And then probably as a social worker, also hearing people's stories. So we're talking about journalism and beyond, obviously, about messaging and voices, the information. Is this better? Yeah. And the information that people are seeking and what is available. I wanted to know from Tunda a little bit, what is some of the feedback that you got before you came to this talk? I know that you checked in with some of your colleagues, let's say, and talking about how Indigenous peoples can be better represented in media. What are some of the approaches? What is some of the feedback that you can give us?
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's true that I not only come here as Tunda, I come here also on behalf of the Indigenous People Network. And when I was told that I'll be here today, I went around asking what or how can we have meaningful reports and relationship with journalists in regard to Indigenous people issues, and looking at the way that the Indigenous people have over time been marginalized and discriminated, and also our legal systems. And if I can talk about the African continent, you find that our political environments are not suitable. And sometimes you find that the Indigenous people, or most of the time, you find that Indigenous people continue to be marginalized over time because of the way of life that we continue to carry on. And I from speaking to the different people in the continent and friends in my network, I will talk about a few things that I picked from our conversations, that we need to make sure that journalism is meaningful to what's Indigenous people issues. And I would say when journalists are relating to Indigenous people, it will be very important that the message is clear from the beginning. If most probably they are carrying out a research on an Indigenous issue or concern, or most probably even an injustice, then it's good to be clear what the questions are, what is actually the focus of this news, and where this news is going to be published, and before the publishing, then it's also good that they go back to the community beforehand, before publishing, and show them the results of the interviews or the research they were making, so that to make sure that the interpretation is right and it doesn't undermine the rights of the Indigenous people or make them more discriminated. Try to get the mindset of the Indigenous or the community that they are interviewing or they are making a report on, because as we all know that Indigenous communities or Indigenous people are not homogeneous. You know, we have unique features from all over there, and therefore things are not, it's not one size fits all. And some things for some Indigenous communities might be sacred or exotic, and therefore they will not want some things to be shared. So we make sure that whatever we share, then we are sharing the appropriately. Oh, I hope I hacked that word. It is therefore important that we make sure that the human right focus is kept in check, and it's whether the journalist is from an Indigenous community or a non-Indigenous, then we make sure that that human right, we have that human right focus in our reporting. The UN resolution on rights of Indigenous people states that Indigenous people and individuals are free to equal and all other equal to all other people, and individuals and have the right to not to be discriminated upon, and also make sure that we also put in check, or make sure that we also observe the free, prior and informed consent right when we are dealing with indigenous people. Let us seek their consent before we air their stories, before we, even if we are airing, let's say there is something that that is an injustice, but you see there is an injustice that you can report and it makes it worse. Knowing how our governments behave sometimes, so it can actually be more detrimental, or instead of making it like bringing a solution, then it makes it worse for the indigenous communities. So those are some of the things that I think it's good that we go back when we are doing reports, go back, make sure we see. Then I would also want to say that it's important that journalists know that we as indigenous people look at them as allies to us, to amplify our voices, to bring out our issues on the table, to give us a voice, to give us a table where we can air out our issues. And when we are doing this, then if they are our allies, then I would say we need to work together and in sync. Also make sure that you, all journalists interview the right people that are deeply connected to the community, deeply rooted to the community, and they understand our issues, understand the injustices that have been there on indigenous, on our community, like a particular community, so that when they are representing, then they have all this at the back of their mind. So because I look at in this world, we need to not only just work with indigenous people. I'll see non-indigenous people as our allies. I'll see journalists as our allies. And I see also some of the politicians as our allies. So identify the right people. Because if the message lands in the right ears, then I think we will make progress, or the right progress in the right direction.
Thank you, Tunda. Thank you.
I think, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I see María Monica, she's nodding her head and nodding her head, so I really wanted to hear from her. Do you agree with Tunda, what she's saying about being an ally to indigenous people? Is that your experience?
Well, I hope I am doing that work right. I hope. I really want to appreciate Tunda for all the tips you're giving us, because I was just taking notes down, because I do believe one important issue, or one important key to keep people safe, not only the journalists but the indigenous communities you're reporting on, is to have the consent from the traditional and local authorities. Like when you enter to an indigenous territory, you have to know that you're entering to a place where the government is not the authority, or the police is not the authority, the indigenous people is the authority. So you have to respect that, like be really conscious about that. And I don't know, if you're going to take a picture, be aware that first of all, you have to ask the local authority or the traditional authority if it's okay to do it, and when to do it, and who you should be taking pictures of, because as Tunda said, there are sacred places that indigenous people don't want to be portrayed in the media. So you have to be really, really aware of that. Like recently I went to La Guajira, that is a department of Colombia, in the northern part of Colombia, which most of the territory is indigenous people from Wayuu. They are called Wayuu people. And there I was there because I was going to do a report about how aeolic projects and wind projects are arriving to a territory, and they are becoming creating a conflict between indigenous people because it's becoming a problem of land, of who owns the land. And then it was really important, like you didn't have to ask the companies that were doing the projects to take the pictures of the OLIC project. You had to ask the local authorities. So I do believe this is really important. Like, even if you're missing out of, I don't know, if you see a picture, like a moment perfect to take a picture because, I don't know, something ceremonial is happening and it's really visual attractive, I know that your journalistic, instinct wants to take that picture, but maybe take a second and be like, okay, it's okay if we take pictures in this place. And I do believe that by doing that, it is going to be safe for you as a journalist, and also you're going to keep the community safer with your reporting.
Thank you, María Monica. I wanted to go to Margherita for a minute because we were talking earlier about people's rights and about words. And so I wanted to prompt her. She said something really interesting, and I wanted her to add to the discussion.
Yes, because this is very linked to what María Monica was saying now, that, okay, if we want to tell a story or even design a project, for instance, with indigenous community, this means that we also have to not only to listen, to be open to listen, but also to be open to be transformed somehow, no? By the words that we will listen. Why? Because actually there is a very interesting recent researches showing that there is a kind of connection between biodiversity and language diversity, meaning that if we lose an indigenous language, this means that we don't lose just a language, but like a worldview, I will say. And now there is a UN decade of indigenous languages, and so we think that this is something that we really need to highlight, because I think that now we miss the words to explain what is happening. And I think that indigenous people actually, they have some words that we are missing, no? I remember for the Indigenous Peoples Day, that was like in August this year, we were collecting some indigenous words, and they were amazing because behind a single word, there was really a story, no? But this is something that only some indigenous communities can have because they have a deep connection to the territory, to the place they live. And so the link that we are missing with our planet is something that they can help us to reconnect. So I think that, yes, words are important.
Thank you, Margherita. And Maria Paula, so you mentioned working with indigenous peoples and how they're sometimes, if I understand correctly, de facto, they become environmental activists because they're protecting their environment and they know things that we don't know. Can you tell me a little bit more about your experience reporting on environmental issues with indigenous people?
And that's a really important point. Today, we talk about, for example, in the case of the Amazon, we talk about the need for this region to face climate change. But we talk about little about the fact that without indigenous people, there will be no Amazon, and that the Amazon is not only a geographical region, it's also a spiritual and epistemological region, one that has existed for more than 10,000 years. And that its nature is the result of centuries in which this jungle has been inhabited for many peoples and indigenous people, of course. I think, from my experience, I think that one problem we have in the media is about territories and is about how we understand the territory. Because we approach them with Western limits, and I'm not talking about only about border limits. I'm talking about also cultural limits. I have a little example. In the department of Amazonas in Colombia, there are communities that are building health centers in areas that the state has never reached and that the health system national does not recognize. There are health centers where they include ancestral knowledge and Western medicine, and they work in these little centers only not for the health, but also for to think about the contamination of the land and of the water, all of that. This is something that will benefit indigenous communities in Colombia, Brazil, and Peru. And I'm talking to you about Colombia, Brazil, and Peru because we have become accustomed to dividing the Amazon according to these borders. But I think that we forget that the rivers like cosmogonies flow without imaginary limits. And limits that we usually have in the big media in the center of the country, for example, in Colombia, which I think from my experience that before going to listen to stories in the Amazon, we should pay attention to how the local people and the local media, because there are local media in the Amazon, tell this region. I think that maybe I know that it's not easy to tell something about the Amazon from Bogota, for example, or from Sao Paulo, or from Lima. But I think that before tell news and focus or our stories in something that happened there, we have to wait and listen to how these people live in their territory, but also how these people tell their territory.
Yeah, thank you, Maria Paula. Very interesting input. I see Anna was nodding her head, so I wanted to know if you had some reactions to what Maria Paula was saying.
Yeah, of course. I want to say something about language, because I think language, as you mentioned, is so important to understand this complicated topic. And for instance, this filmmaker that we were able to showcase on the BBC, and that was the winner of our festival, which means that like people really loved that story. So his story was about a tape, and it was a tape that was in his family, and it was his grandmother trying to teach to her children some words of their language that are now, basically it's a lost language now. And he's a filmmaker in his 20s, and he found this tape, and he was able to build a movie around it, around these simple words. It was words about nature, like the sun or the sky, but not only the poetry is important, but it, as you said, it's an entire world that was in this world, and that he was managed to communicate to an audience. So I think for us it was really important to be able to show this to, millions of people that come to the BBC website, because now they have an idea of this incredible richness, this biodiversity of language that is so important to preserve. So that's why I was getting excited while you were talking. Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Margherita. On the way over, we were also having a conversation about the buzz this week in Perugia is artificial intelligence, right? It's a buzz in media, and how in media we're starting to ask questions like, how do we even know if this is real or if it's been generated artificially? And then on the other hand, here we are talking about how journalism should slow down so we can get out to the remote places and hear people's stories and go back and check to make sure we're saying the right thing and that the community is in agreement. It's just a question, and I might even throw it out to the audience. How can we bring these two together? I mean, where is there an intersection? Does anyone have any ideas? And I see someone has their hand up, so microphone person, jump into the audience. I see a young woman with her hand up.
That's funny because I was just discussing exactly this with a friend over lunch today. Oh, yeah. Technology. No, I was saying it's funny because I was just discussing this with a friend, exactly this, over lunch today. And we were saying AI, we tend to talk in journalism now about AI as being a technology that takes away our jobs, and that's then a lot of it is then the discussion. Whereas we should actually also talk about the fact that there is a big part of journalism that AI cannot take over, which is the human aspect. And a friend of mine, a journalist from Singapore, she's also very much into AI, and she's also saying it gives us an opportunity to do even more work on the ground and go out of the door, go and talk to people, speak to people. And so we shouldn't have a discussion about AI taking over our jobs. If it's possible for AI to take over our jobs, then we're doing something wrong already. So
we should be doing our jobs better.
Yeah,
than
well,
a robot.
I mean, yeah, go out there. That's the role of a journalist, is also to go out, connect with communities, do the on the ground work. So, yeah.
That's very interesting. I see the fellow next to you also has something to say.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a nice, easy passover. Hi, I'm a freelance. I've done quite a bit of reporting on sort of indigenous peoples around the world. I'm in the Amazon and recently Indonesia. And one example recently, actually last year in the US, was visiting sort of Navajo Nation, and I was there sort of interviewing an elder to do just an interview on a project that was happening there, and I asked the first question, and he started speaking for 10 minutes, and I tried to sort of get another question in, and then he kept on going, and maybe 20 minutes. Anyway, at the end of the interview, basically, the NGO that was involved explained to me that that's actually sort of a Navajo tradition for the elders to kind of explain their entire history before they will go into an interview process. And it would have been helpful, obviously, for me to have learned that before and known about it. And I just wonder if you have any recommendations, just in terms of resources and ways to good, I suppose actually good examples of reporting from journalists, just as case studies or ways that we can learn to be better.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And I'm going to, Anna, you're nodding. Do you have any examples to point to?
That's such a great story, right? Such a great example of a situation in which you have to understand where you are. And it's good that you were there. You were not alone. You had an NGO there that could help you understand what was the right way of doing it. So I think, as everybody, as María Monica was saying before, the most important thing is to really go prepare in the sense of being able to explain what you're doing and have people that are there with you in a co-creation project, so that you're not alone, and you understand how to do things in a way that are appropriate, right? And have that attitude of curiosity and intelligence, also of listening to people that know more about what's going on there. So I think we all have been in that situation, and usually if you go with the right attitude and you have the time to do that kind of research, so that it's not this breaking news that you have to produce a thing in 5 minutes. So you always, I think a good tip would be try to always carve yourself time to find the right people that are going to help you understand what's the ethical and right way to do your story. I don't know if that's
yeah. Thank you, Anna. That's true. I mean, it's about time, isn't it? And in America, they say time is money, but I think that for indigenous people, that's probably a horrible thing to hear, right? You take your time, and you want to get it right, and we have the seasons, and we have the whole day. And I wanted to go back to Tunda. There's something that's related but not related, because I noticed in your bio that you're also working with slow food, and you're working to try to save the red sheep.
The red Maasai sheep.
Yeah, the red Maasai sheep. So I wanted to do a teeny bit about that, because I was thinking as well about indigenous communities and then the whole foodie movement. And I remember a few years back, it was the year of quinoa, and the UN was really pushing this grain. It's not even a grain; it's a seed. as the superfood. And this was a traditional indigenous meal, and it's also, it's mostly wild and it's difficult to cultivate if it's not growing naturally. And then I remember that it turned into such like a movement, such a big thing that they were actually running out of supply, that they'd oversold the idea of eating quinoa. So I just want to go to you, Tunda, and tell me a little bit more about the Maasai red sheep and what it's taking to save them, and why they're becoming so rare.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Susan. The red Maasai sheep is a special sheep that carries our name, and it's an endangered species because our government, the Ministry of Agriculture, some time back, introduced exotic breeds to the Maasai community. And this has slowly eaten or almost made extinct the red Maasai sheep, which is a hardy breed, and also that is accustomed to our environment. Most of our lands are semi-arid or arid areas. Therefore, we have very little rains, and the red Maasai sheep is able to withstand these climatic conditions, and also it's resistant to diseases and pests, and it's also an easy breed to take care of, as the Maasai is being a pastoralist and practicing nomadism and pastoralism, moving from one place to another one, then it becomes very easy for us to take care of this sheep. However, the Doper was introduced to the red Maasai, to the Maasai community, and it ate slowly and almost made our sheep extinct. So together with the IFAD and Slow Food International, we are able to start a program or a project to restore the red Maasai sheep. And this program has grown, and we have now pure red Maasai sheep. It was so hard also actually to get it. We went to Tanzania because the Maasai are also located in Tanzania. We have Maasai both in Kenya and Tanzania. So we got a pure breed from Tanzania. We were not able to get it from Kenya. So now we have it in Kenya. We established 3 communities now that are taking care of the red Maasai sheep and restoration. And what we are doing, we are not selling, we are doing the breeding. As then we share when we get more, we share with the community so that we can restore the sheep. And this is making our work easier of making sure that, one, we retain our heritage, as the red Maasai sheep carries our name, our pride, because we use this sheep to in our ceremonies, in our marriages, initiation ceremonies. When we're celebrating the birth of a child, we would slaughter the red Maasai sheep, and so it's a sheep that is very close to our heart. And to my heart, I would say, to my heart, I'm very cultural. I started a journey of restoration also of some of the medicinal plants that the Maasais have used over time, our ancestors. I've never gone to hospital for like sickness, you know. The one time I've been in hospital is to give birth. And but for sickness, I do home remedies, and all these are local from my traditional medicinal background. So when I started this journey, my mom was very fascinated, so she was really supporting me when she gets one, and she's like, "Oh, Tunda, I got this one was a special thing for a cough, you know," and all those things. So and she gave me some piece of land to establish a botanical garden. So it's still in not very advanced stages, but with time, I believe most probably in my next phase, I'm gonna be a herbalist. So that's what I am doing. Yeah.
Thank you, Tunda. Thank you very much. I think we only have about 3 or 4 minutes left, so I want to, 5 minutes.
Anna,
Okay.
can I say something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think very important also, it's also good that when we are communicating as journalists, it's good that we make sure that our words or the terms that we use in our reporting are terms that are acceptable. They are not, I don't know, for lack of a better word, Eurocentric or Western-centric, you know, so that we avoid also being offensive, like, for example, using, like, saying we helping, let's say, poor, rural, indigenous people, something like that. That's just an example. We make sure that our wordings are acceptable. I think that's something that we also need to note as journalists.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Tunda. I'm going to go to the audience because I know I have people who want to have questions. Yes. Somebody get that microphone back to that lady. And while we're here also, we have a 360 video right outside the room. So when you're finished, if you want to spend 10 minutes, it takes 10 minutes, you put on the eyepiece and you can watch a really interesting, you'll have a 360 immersion into an indigenous area in Brazil. Yes, please.
Yeah, I had a question around, I mean, we've heard a lot during the whole festival about the importance of decolonizing journalism and avoiding kind of parachute. And my question was, and as Anna said, she's moved away from kind of reporting on these communities yourself to elevating local indigenous journalists. So my question is, as a non-indigenous journalist, to what extent is it my place to even be reporting on issues affecting indigenous communities?
That's a really good question. Who wants to answer? I would think of Tunda. Should we be reporting on indigenous issues if we're not indigenous ourselves?
Yeah, of course, because I said we were allies. We live in this world, and no one really, we didn't choose to be indigenous. I normally say that. We found ourselves indigenous, but we are still human beings. We are social beings, and therefore, whether indigenous or non-indigenous, then I think it's okay as long as we do it on the right way. Make sure that we also make sure the human right aspect is taken care of, and blah blah blah. Very okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else from the audience? Any questions? I'm going to throw a question to Maria Paula because I know it's very early for her, and I think that she might be very sleepy or getting bored. I don't know. So I want to know, Maria Paula, social media, indigenous people, is that an opportunity for them to get their voice out?
Yeah, of course. Can I tell you a little story?
Please. Yes.
Last year in September, I met her name is Aura Luz Bastia Samboni. She's from the Yanacona Indigenous people on the outskirts of Mocoa, the capital of the Amazonian department of Putumayo. Aura, along with other people from other indigenous communities in Putumayo and in the department of Paupés, participated in an initiative of the NGOs, Sinergias and Internews, which consisted of workshops on health journalism with an indigenous focus. These workshops addressed different topics such as the loss of knowledge about ancestral medicine in some communities, the impact of land and water contamination from activities like mining, and even the impact of Colombia's armed conflict on the indigenous people of the Amazon. So Aura, in 2020, she was pregnant, and before the delivery of before the birth of his child, she and her husband sent a letter to the hospital of Mocoa to asking to return the placenta after the born, because they have a ritual to bury it at home, and that has a special symbolism for these people. But on the day of the born, the nurses threw the placenta to the trash. Aura told me that, and I didn't know. I could tell that in a reportage, in a report. So I asked her, and she told me no, please no. But I spent several days in Putumayo, and one more she told me that since I had heard the story, it was my story, her story. I think that this highlights something that has been happening in the Colombian Amazon for decades, and that is the absence of indigenous knowledge in national health system decisions. On the same trip to Putumayo, I spoke with indigenous doctor Juan Pablo Jamioy, born in Putumayo and graduate of the National University of Colombia. Juan Pablo told me, for example, that there is no census of indigenous health professionals to be taken into account in order to integrate medicine in hospitals, as required by law for more than 30 years. So I am, as well as that trip to Putumayo, I have had the opportunity to go to other areas of the Amazon where I listen to the discussions held by different indigenous peoples, and I think that the little story of Aura and her experience in 2020 is a little point that highlighted us how the meet between big media and local experiences can maybe change the focus, how we understand the reality of indigenous people.
Thank you so much, Maria Paula. And I have Alex came and whispered in my ear that it's over. So unfortunately, we've run out of time. But this is so interesting, and I'm sure we could continue to talk for hours. But thank you, everybody, for joining, and thank our guests. Thank you, Tunda, María Monica, María Paula, Margherita, and Ana for being here, and thank all of you for being here as well. Cheers. And don't forget, we have our 360 video outside with the headpieces that you can immerse yourself. Thank you.